Hi, beautiful ones. My intention with the Shamangelic Healing Podcast is to be a platform that explores real-life issues and provides you with valuable insights and practical tools to support you on your journey of healing core wounds and reclaiming your power and manifesting a thriving, impactful life that you absolutely love. You see, it's my dream to inspire millions to shine. So if you find these topics valuable, please take a moment and share the podcast and leave us a rave review. This helps the podcast grow and reach the people that would greatly benefit from these insights. Thank you so much for tuning in and investing in your personal development. I'm right here walking this journey with you. So let's dive into this episode. Welcome to the Shamangelic Healing Podcast. Oh, this is going to be a juicy one. We're diving into and addressing how to heal the shadow side of sex and power. And this is a deep topic. We are by no means experts. We're talking very transparently so that we can kind of bring light to this issue and to this topic and some tools and some awareness. And I'm so grateful to have you on the show. This is Ananda Yogiji, a dear soul brother. And also what I appreciate about you as someone who sings mantra and is on this spiritual path, and you're a musician, and you're a spiritual teacher, and you're also really a devoted spiritual student. And we've had a lot of topics, we've had a lot of conversations about this topic. Like, we've gone deep into, where spiritual teachers are, sleeping with their students, and there's most recently a lot has come to the forefront about musicians that accusations about their sexual indiscretions, and we just wanted to have a chat. We had such a deep conversation the other day, which we tend to do.
Yes.
we tend to do. And I really feel like we could go deep and honest and transparent and share some perspective and also insight, and from a male's perspective, from a female's perspective, what we've seen, what we've done, where we're struggling. And we just want to let everybody watching and listening know that we do have free gifts for you. So a free guided meditation on how to kind of go in for sexual healing for women and sexual healing for men, and upcoming events. You're going to see all of Ananda's, all of his details are definitely going to be in the show notes. So and you have a free gift as well. So I just want to let people know before we dive in, be sure to check the show notes so that you can get free gifts and connect to all of your beautiful music and your tour and what's coming up for you. So, brother.
The topic of the moment.
Yeah, it is. And what I appreciate is that we're able to be, you're a dear brother to me, and we've always been able to be transparent and safe about tender, vulnerable issues, our own relationships, our own challenges. And so thank you for just being here and being you,
It's absolutely my pleasure.
Yeah. So what do you make of what's happening right now? Recently, allegations in the music community. We have the whole Me Too movement that has been bringing awareness to in the whole political scene, in politics, in corporate America, and also in Hollywood. It's all over the place, and of course
the spiritual world, of course.
And the spiritual world.
Where it hits hardest, I think.
Yeah, right? It is, because we don't expect it there. We don't expect it there. And I think that's the biggest, wake-up call is like, wait, this, these people, they should be above this.
Yeah.
So, what has this stirred up for you as you navigate this as a male and as a performer and somebody who's on the spiritual path? Like, what do you make of this? What's going on with this?
It's big. I obviously have been taking in just each account. I mean, there's obviously different accounts in the different arenas that we were talking about, whether it's politically, whether it's the musician, whether it's the spiritual teacher, whether it's the corporate, whether it's just, in a relationship where it's just kind of a day-to-day thing and you hear about the cheating or anyways, all the different things that could possibly take place. And of course, I witnessed that within myself. I witnessed it within myself. Right. Absolutely. There's aspects of it that are playing out within me. Yeah. That are playing out within me. And I think as I have matured and I've witnessed more and more of it, and I have experienced more of my own life experiences, that I have found that I have to witness myself first, how I'm reacting. Yeah. How am I reacting to what's unfolding? And how does it make me feel? Am I, and the whole gamut of emotions that might go into that. And I also feel like what I'm discerning now is what aspect of me is also playing out in that.
This is more of the spiritual perspective, is to look not just as at a perpetrator or somebody who has been accused or like to look at the situation through them as a place of separation. What I'm hearing you say is this is when we witness something like this inhumanity, we get to see, what is this bringing up in me? Mm-hmm. Is there a core wound? Am I irritated by this? Am I taking sides? Where do I stand on this? Am I indifferent? Am I angry? Do I feel betrayed? And I think that there's a lot of mixed emotions, especially like just recently with this music in the music community. That says, wow, this is somebody that I respected. And I hear this a lot of people, whether it was a spiritual teacher or a politician or, a boss or whatever. Wow, this is somebody, or a pastor in a congregation. This is somebody that I respected. Mm-hmm. And what I hear a lot of times is a common theme of, I had this person on a pedestal. I didn't think that they would, or even if it's not on a pedestal, but I didn't think that they would have sexual indiscretions or affairs or be imposing their will on another person. And those are big accusations. And I think that one piece is, wow, the shock of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, wait, that person is, talks about these kinds of things. This is in their platform. This is in their spiritual teachings. This is in their songs. And I think that when we witness an event, an occurrence, an accusation, whether it's, proven or not proven, just when we first have that experience, is that the shock of the letdown of, I didn't think this person could do that. Mm-hmm. So what has been, what are you feeling right now in the music community? What was your response just initially with the possibility of, or the probability, or in other cases where we know it's actually the case, and musicians on tour, this is not anything new. Mm-hmm. But specifically, not just any musicians, but musicians that are standing on a platform that is more, hey, let's be conscious, there's unity here, let's treat our brothers and sisters with respect, and Mother Nature and Mother Earth. And so where do you feel like there's an incongruence with the message and then what may be happening behind closed doors? Like, how do you feel about that, and what does that bring up for you?
Well, it ultimately, I guess, especially because it's just been a series of particularly men, almost always men, just be honest, of this happening, and I wasn't as shocked this time. Yeah. And I had already heard a bit about, the background behind this. So I'm more witnessing it within myself and how people are reacting around it, how people are acting and reacting about it, how to go deeper into the wounding, deeper into the understanding of why this is taking place, especially with someone who, like you're saying, is singing or teaching about certain things. I've had several teachers, very dear spiritual teachers, that have had some profound sexual allegations come out about them in the last few years. So it's been the ongoing exploration of why.
What's underneath it?
Why?
What's underneath it? Yeah.
And of course, that again has to reflect back to me.
Yeah.
Of like why and to what degree is it playing out with me? Because here I am, I'm a musician, I'm a teacher, even
On
more
tour,
challenging.
yep.
I'm a spiritual musician, spiritual teacher. So there's more responsibility and the potential of the shadow to express and then to be illuminated, but not in a healing way, but more like in a blast you out way. And this is something we talked about before, like, are people, can they hold themselves accountable? Can they apologize? Can they step into that place of humility? And the answer has basically always been no.
Not often.
Very very
so
few.
What we're talking about here is when there has been a proven indiscretion. Let's just say, and in some cases with a spiritual teacher or a musician, there's been many, or a politician, there has been many, and what it appears like is the more power, the more public and the greater the followership, the more the following, and the greater the popularity. It seems like with greater power, it seems to be like there's either more exposure to more women, or it's harder to say no, or the ego's more inflated, or there is more of an isolation with, I'm the lead of the band, or I'm the guru of this spiritual of this organization, or I am the CEO. And so it seems like there's a little bit, or a politician, there seems like there's a little bit of I'm untouchable here. Whether it's my money or my fame kind of buys me a little bit of loyalty from people that I employ, or that look up to me, or have me on a pedestal, or love my music, or my movies, and or they like my politics here, so they're willing. And I think that this is part of where we're all complicit in some way, where we turn a blind eye and allow it to keep happening, and that people in the band, or people on set, or people that are in the spiritual organization or within the company are allowing this kind of behavior. They hear rumors, but they don't do anything about it, and they don't say anything about it. And other guys in the band don't want to call a brother out, which is not unlike in the police force, where it's like, hey, I don't want to, the brother code is I don't rat out another police officer. But therefore we're all involved in that complicitness of holding these people in a bubble of untouchability. Whether that's a minister, we don't go after a minister, or a politician, or a CEO, because they give us great returns on our investment, or we love their music. And so it seems that as the power rises, there is an ego bubble and an untouchability that kind of goes hand in hand with that. And what I hear you saying also is that when the skeleton does come out of the closet, there's not an inclination to be in integrity about it, to be honest about it, to do the ethical thing and say, hey, you know what? I did make these choices. I was using women that worked for me, to promotions. Like I did use sex in power, or I did, use my popularity to take advantage of, perhaps sometimes, a follower in a spiritual organization, or a fan, that has these googly eyes about whether it's, you know, a celebrity or a musician or any of that, or and professional athletes. We forgot about that one. Professional athletes, you know, we laugh not out of disrespect to the like the depth of the core wounding that is happening here. It's not humorous. The humor is how ridiculous it has gone unchecked. I believe that we're both laughing at how ridiculous it is that it's still perpetuating. And it seems like there is not a level of an accountability, and that the person, even if it's proven and there's 17 people coming forward with, if 17 people are coming forward, you know, there's a lot more that don't. And that there is this that there's not a willingness of the person in that situation to be humble and accountable and make amends. So let's look at what's underneath that. What do you think the core wounding is for that person that is so in their own blind spot about their own behavior that they've justified it such that the ego is keeping it all in check? And so, as you've noticed with different spiritual teachers, and we've talked about that, or musicians or whatever it is, what do you think's going on underneath, you know, the wounding that would create such an experience for somebody to be making these choices without an ethical, you know, consequence?
Well, I can speak from my own experience because I'm living it, and typically, I mean, I guess it depends on the rise to fame. Some people it's a slower, gradual. Some people it's very fast. And I would say that most people, especially when they get to that level of power, men in particular, because that's what we're really addressing, have no idea how powerful their egos are going to be when they hit that level. And the degree of desire and enticement that is there is overwhelming. And so then, of course, the manipulation is rampant. It's rampant because they don't have the tools to deal with the incredible ego burst that's taking place.
And it sounds like there's also, like you said, there's a lot more perhaps exposure to that. The bigger the fan base, the more popular you get, then you have maybe more women throwing themselves at you. Is that part of it, or is it just more of this power play of like It's
all of the above.
Yeah, it's all of the above.
It's all of the above for sure.
So, what I see happening is if there's any kind of sexual distortion early on, it's only going to get amplified when you add these extra factors of fame and power and money. That it's just going to get amplified.
Right.
So there's a core sexual distortion that if it wasn't there, it wouldn't be.
Well, here's the question: who doesn't have that?
Women included, you know.
Exactly.
Of course,
so
women included.
What ends up happening, I think, what we're talking about is that maybe at a just general day-to-day level, it's it could be typically a very minor thing. But as fame and power and money and influence grows, that potential is majorly expanded. And the impact of that can be majorly expanded. And so then there's this massive responsibility on the part of those beings to do that inner work, to explore and understand and to heal and to maintain a sense of integrity. And I just know from my own experience, it's extremely hard. Because on the one hand, you have your, you know, whatever you call it, your conscious, your higher self, and you recognize that. And at the same time, you also have this incredible power of the unconscious desires that are constantly playing into this, you know, you're going to be happier. You're going to feel a lot better. if you fulfill this desire. Like you're going to feel really good if you fulfill
feels
that
good.
desire. It feels good. And it feels good. And then if you
We're
get
basically talking about sex.
that's one aspect of it, but it's an addictive behaviors in general, right? And so it's a profound journey. It really is. And there is that degree of like understanding. If you explore and understand why this is taking place, then ultimately I think our hope and our continuing hope is that you'll have compassion for the people who are deeply suffering in this place. And
Just
of course,
everybody.
And of course have compassion for the people who also are playing into that or willingly or unwillingly the victims of these kind of hurtful actions.
You've mentioned twice the word responsibility.
Yeah.
That says as you grow in fame, as you grow in power, that there is a responsibility. And I think when we look at a professional athlete that goes from 18 to 22 that says, hey, we're going to let your grades slide because you're a really good basketball player. We're going to let your behavior slide, that there's these allegations around sexual assault. We're going to make those go away because you are the star football player. And so I want to acknowledge part of the problem is that there's enabling happening all along the way. It is that, you're the CEO and you give us, you're getting a good return on our investment. Your personal life is really not an issue here as long as you line our pockets with money. And so we get to see where coaches, teachers, other students are complicit when there is a rape culture or a sexual abuse culture that is, being turned a blind eye. Or this is the minister and he's the deacon of the church, and so he can do no wrong, and when there's these indiscretions, nobody talks about it. So it feels like there's this whole there's a responsibility not only of the person to be more ethical as the power rises, which I don't think there's anyone getting behind that and saying, hey, as you go to this next level, it's important for you to be more responsible. And I don't think coaches are saying that. I don't think corporate America is saying that. Politicians aren't saying, hey, as you get more responsible and hold more power from city government to the Oval Office, there is a higher level of integrity and impeccability as you rise. And we have not held our leaders to that standard of integrity and responsibility. In fact, we voted very much for politicians, irregardless of their sexual indiscretions, they're still getting rewarded for that behavior because, hey, you're a good actor, you're a great you're a fantastic politician in this area, or there's this power play of things that are happening that says, hey, I'll look the other way because I want to buy your loyalty. So we get to see that there is a responsibility in a couple areas that I think we're falling short as a society is individuals that says, hey, I have someone's heart in my hand. When we're just looking at the dating level of responsibility that says, I'm responsible for somebody else's heart. Am I going to leave it more whole than I found it? And this is something that I keep intending on my personal journey, which I wasn't aware of before, of like, wow, on my personal development journey, like I want to leave someone's heart more whole than I found it, which with that level of integrity, that cut off a whole lot of options that I would have very unconsciously said yes to and did lots of times, even if it was consensual. Mm-hmm. It was like, this actually isn't in the highest alignment, or we want different things. And just holding, it wasn't like there was some third party or some ethical code holding me to a higher responsibility. And I think we miss that in our tribe, to have our ethical councils intact, because they're not ethical. They're not in integrity. Our leaders in politics, in business, they're the perpetrators. And so there's this moral tragedy, I believe, that's happening in humanity right now, where we're kind of navigating really without an anchor and without a correct moral compass.
Yeah.
And what we were raised with, what our parents were raised with, was quite corruption around sexuality and power. And if we look at the media, it also perpetuates that.
Yeah.
So I feel like, one, there's a responsibility for an internal ethical moral code, even if others aren't holding us accountable for that. But I also feel like there's a responsibility for us to support our brothers and sisters in upholding an ethical code, so that if I'm in the band, that I say, hey, bro, what's up? I call a brother out and say, hey, what's up? You know, what are you doing? Whether that's in the boardroom, whether that's on stage, whether that is in politics or, you know, on the field. Hey, like, this isn't okay. And I believe that many of us have been complicit. I have been complicit, kind of ignoring certain things because of whatever reason. That, you know, we can do better here about not allowing these behaviors to go unchecked, so that they get rewarded and perpetuated. And so this is where I think the ego gets fed, and then nowhere along the way has there been accountability, so that now when somebody has more power, it feels like, oh, you're going to slap me hand on the wrist now? I've gotten away with this every step of the way. I'm untouchable here. And so that tells me that we've been irresponsible as a community in the way we raise each other. And so what, how could that look different? How could that look different by holding a safe space to be called out or be called out? You know, like with your spiritual teachers, like
friends
and
it's a big
and how could somebody help you in calling you out in places where, if they witness that or call me out, I mean, what might that look like? So that, you know, those of us that don't realize that we've been enabling a situation by saying, you know, well, it's okay.
Yeah. Well, from my experience, speaking with you, for example, I've spoken with you about some pretty deep and intimate aspects of my life, and obviously my shortcomings to a certain degree, and how to grow and how to really witness myself, because obviously when you are caught up in a big story, big egos, I mean, because what we're talking about is egomaniacs, basically. We're talking about massive egos, massive stories, massive fame. So how could you get vulnerable in that place? Well,
and it isn't just, this isn't just people that are in the 1% of the 1%. This is happening in small bands. This is happening in, you know, mom and pop companies where people are using their position of power to extort sexual favors. I mean, this is happening in living rooms, you know, everywhere. And so in politics, corporate America. So, I mean, it's not just the 1% of the 1%. But even within that, when somebody is, let's just say, out of integrity with their sexual energy, whether it is a father, a pastor, what I'm hearing is that there is a level of, you know, egoic nature that is in denial that there's an issue.
Yeah. So then it's it's typically not a fast process. You know, I don't
Thanks
think
for
it's
transparency.
I don't think it's a fast process. Because if you think about how it got built up, I mean, the popping of the bubble is very traumatic.
Sure.
I would think. I mean, the big fall from grace is very traumatic. My experience with you and others who I have been able to be very vulnerable with, who I felt like it's important that you are heard, understood, held, loved, and corrected.
That's a delicate line to walk as somebody who's holding space, and I esteem to be such a person that can withhold judgment not that I agree with what's happening.
Yeah.
Whether it's someone on a big stage or a dear friend of mine or a colleague or whatever it is, what I'm hearing is that there needs to be a safe space for somebody to be transparent and talk about their struggles with it, their addictions, their vulnerability, their guilt, their desires, and create a safe space for understanding. Not, I think what happens a lot is there's such public shaming because there's anger, and the bubble is burst, but then there's all of this, all the truth comes out of all of the things that didn't get checked, and so all of the unresolved anger from all of the times of those experiences now kind of create this really intense tsunami, and then right. And that not unlike the riots that recently happened, with the civil unrest around, Black Lives Matter. And you're like, wow, how come there's such aggression? It's like, because nobody listened for so long. This has not been attended to. And so it seems like when the bubble is burst, a person, whether it's a deacon in a bishop in a church, or a CEO or a musician, a celebrity, or whatever, they're representing all of it. Not only their indiscretions, but they're representing the issue.
Like a collective, collective upholding of unconscious power.
And unresolved, yes, exactly. And all of the unreconciled traumas or indiscretions that people have experienced get projected onto that person.
And there's that huge projection of people, people admiring the power that they have acquired. There's admiration of that,
right?
Which then upholds them,
right? So that we've talked about how what keeps them there is, well, I don't want to out that my job may be. We talked about we were talking earlier about a friend who I know is in this particular band, and I'm like, I can see how that would be challenging because he's employed by that band and like his livelihood. These are their friends, and this is his career and his passion. So you can see how that silence is complicit. It's complicit, and it enables it, to continue. But somebody that is, now it's coming to the forefront to be seen. Okay, so and so's accused of whatever, and then here come more people. So now the likelihood of that having happened is, likely that it happened, and. When somebody gets it like that in the face, and they're not in this space where what we've talked about is a safe space that says, hey, what's up? And what's going on with you? And the person has to be willing to be able to say, hey, yeah, I'm dealing with this, or I struggle with this, or I want to evolve this. Because if there isn't, it's kind of like an unsolicited drug intervention. Okay, we're intervening and we're putting you into rehab, which never works. Usually doesn't work because it's not their idea. They're not ready. They're not agreeing that they have a drug problem. And so it doesn't really land, So then when a different environment, like a public scandal with a politician or a celebrity or a musician, or an athlete, now gets in the crosshairs, how much harder is it for that person to really get at the issues and the healing work when there's hate press, hate mail, contracts are being pulled? How is the likelihood that they're actually going to get at the issues that created this distortion in the first place and get the help that they need?
I don't know. I can imagine that it's a very intense experience. Yeah. I think with any kind of intense experience, the potential for awakening is very much present.
Right. There's the opportunity.
There is the opportunity. And so and that is the case that sometimes when people go to jail, for example, and have everything taken from them, then there is a massive awakening that can happen. Of course, we also know that it can be very traumatic and not help people.
The
awaken.
opposite.
Yeah. So it really still comes back to the individual and what they're willing to awaken to.
And you know what, Ananda, this is what's interesting, is that we kind of expect that from somebody who is really asleep and unconscious anyway, that they're going to pay off or ignore or deny. And what is surprising is when it's a spiritual teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And their talk anyway, is about awakening and accountability and personal mindfulness and awareness. Yeah. And in those situations, you and I have both been exposed to different experiences where we know spiritual teachers where it has come out and there has still been, a complete denial, even though there's a lot of evidence to the contrary.
Yeah.
And so what's going on, do you think, there with a spiritual teacher that is still not looking at their own shadow? And what can we learn on our own personal, what are they showing us? Mm-hmm. Because this is happening in the forefront for us all to look at.
Exactly, yeah.
Because they're modeling what not to do. Mm-hmm. And whether they make amends and make the shift or not isn't our personal experience. It's more about what am I going to do differently, and how can I change and evolve.
Yeah.
What do you think what do you think a spiritual teacher is showing us in that situation where we would expect them to be a little bit more conscious here?
Yeah. I have always felt that if the person...
So sticky, isn't it? God, it's so sticky.
I have felt that if the person who has been, in this case, so we say spiritually, or even just uplifting me, like through music, or inspiring me to serve in a community or at the political level, because ultimately politicians are there to serve, people.
Lead, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That the challenge is of the utmost magnitude. It's of the utmost magnitude, and this is not a simple thing, and it's not something that will just go away, and it's not just about a couple therapy sessions, and it's not just about doing a little bit of yoga or a little bit of breath work. This is a serious endeavor that one has to take on and continue to look at yourself in a very deep and most times very uncomfortable way.
Well, this is what I think is the opportunity when we get to see on a pedestal somebody. And this, part of the issue that I experienced, one of the lessons that I took was, I put this person on a pedestal. There's an opportunity for me to have a lesson that I thought just because they were this level of fame or this level of, spiritual best-selling author, whatever, or this acclaimed spiritual teacher, that doesn't mean they're beyond humanness, and that they have everything integrated. They may be incredibly awake and aware of the spiritual teachings, and many of them embodied, and some of them still in process. And so one of the things that I took away from those experiences that, this spiritual teacher is showing me everybody's human. That was one thing. And not to put anybody on a pedestal and have unrealistic expectations. And also, as I study with anyone or I admire anyone, always to keep a level, not to self-abandon and follow them blindly. And this is where we have Jim Jones and, like drinking the Kool-Aid that, I'm this awakened, teacher, follow me all to drink the Kool-Aid and die together. And so I think that there's, when we look at spiritual teachers or people that we've put on a pedestal, is to always maintain a certain level of awareness that they have their own flaws, and that just because they're awakened in this one area, or talented or gifted or intelligent or powerful in this one area, doesn't mean that they aren't deeply wounded or working on integrating these other things in another area of their life. And I've had many teachers where I've had to be like, oh, I'm seeing the shadow side of my teacher, and I'm all of a sudden watching, this betrayal. I'm feeling this betrayal and this wounding that, but I thought you were perfect. How dare you betray my expectation of you? Mm-hmm. And that was one of the greatest teachings that, one of my teachers brought to me was that very thing. And so I believe even a spiritual teacher or any teacher is bringing us a lesson, in that it may be, don't do this, or do it in acknowledge this and do it in a different way.
And the promotion of vulnerability is just hardly ever present. Like, how often are we going to ask our politicians or sports athletes or musicians or spiritual teachers, let alone, which really should be the most transparent, what are your challenges? What are you really working on? Like, what and what are you doing to work on those things? And maybe as a community, how can we support you so that you're not going to indulge in your unconscious patterns? I think in particular, whatever, if it's musicians or, I guess a lot of times it feels more impactful in a spiritual community and a spiritual teacher. That tends to be like, it feels like it's the most impactful. But of course, it never feels good at the political level or, sports level, corporate level. It always sucks. It always feels a betrayal. There's always like, God, they just couldn't uphold their values. But especially with a spiritual musician or teacher focusing on that, then there's even more of an emphasis and there's more judgment around that.
Well, it feels like, we might have peers at this, like a pyramid, we might have peers at this level that can call us out. And when you go to this point where you're the spiritual teacher, who's holding you accountable?
Who's holding you accountable?
And I think that's an issue, that's a problem, whether it's in the Oval Office, whether it's the CEO, whether it is the star of the basketball team, who is holding them accountable, who's their spiritual counsel, who's their integrity counsel.
And interestingly enough, when, for example, with the government and with the political put in place, they spent so much time with the legalities of the structure of how to maintain a democracy and how to maintain a republic. The founding fathers took a lot of time, and mothers, a lot of time to figure out how to not
have an
incredibly corrupt
power
system.
Where there's checks and balances.
There's the checks and balances. There's a huge emphasis on that. And of course we live in a corrupted system, but I will say that if you compare it to many other systems in the world, there's a certain degree that you can still really appreciate the degree that they put this emphasis on the checks and balances of a legal system,
right,
of a way to say, hey, like, how do we just not completely have a dictatorship all the time, or a king and a queen,
right,
or whatever it may be. And that same kind of understanding to a certain degree has to be in spiritual organizations, to a certain degree has to be with musicians, with sports athletes. The problem is there's been this lack of understanding, because ultimately when you've hit the threshold of the law, like you're breaking a law, you're doing so much trauma. Yeah. Because at that point it's like rape, or at that point it's underage, or at that point it's on and on and on, prostitution, or whatever it may be. So at that point it's so much trauma. And as a more and more awakening people and society, we have to look at it much more closely, at a much more level that it's just like that before it gets to such extremes.
This is where it goes back to being accountable way early on, so that that doesn't get woven into our police force, or it doesn't get to the point where we have whole commerce businesses supporting this, and it doesn't give us the opportunity. It doesn't give us. We have accountability, and we the people can vote. We can use our dollars. We can use our voice. We actually have the power to say this isn't okay. It's whether or not we are being responsible to do that. We're using our voice, using our dollars, using our votes to let somebody know this is a no, or hey, we want this instead of this. So this is our opportunity that for everybody involved. If you're unhappy with the way it's been, kind of like with social, like with civil rights, if you've been unhappy with the way it's been, we probably haven't been getting involved enough. And for somebody that is at that level feeling so untouchable, it is important, especially if there is sexual assault and sexual abuse and sexual indiscretions, is that we begin to be more deliberate about calling that out and saying it isn't okay, and calling it out earlier and earlier and earlier. And because, like we said, hey, even a spiritual teacher at the top, is the ego's so entrenched at that point that it's beyond their ability to hold themselves accountable. And so in that, they get to show us what not to do. So that gives us the opportunity. You and I have just learned that, okay, if we're in this space of personal development, or personal awakening, spiritual teachings, whatever it is, that we get to hold ourselves to a higher standard, and we also get to be vulnerable and honest more often about where we're struggling, where we're struck, where we're not in integrity, and hey, this is an issue that I talk about, I teach about, and I'm not fully implementing, or I have, but this hiccup happened and I've gotten off track and I need to get back on track. And this is where, implementing councils of support that do help to hold us accountable, our brothers and our sisters in our tribe that we can lean on and to help us long before we get way down a dark path with it. In a safe environment where it's non-judgmental, and saying, okay, how can I support you? How can I support you?
Yeah, because regardless, this ultimately is still about the exploration of your own self, your own being. And these things are happening for us, not to us. It's happening for us to grow, to awaken. And it's happening within us, it's happening outside of it. I think there's a certain degree that most people can relate to what's happening, or why. I mean, the reason that they've been allowed to get to that place is because there's been an allowing within your own being.
Right.
Like, oh, it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. There isn't that gray, slippery slope.
Yeah.
And, so this is where we get to be honest about, okay, self-responsibility, and where there has not been that. And I think, as me personally, and when we look at the way women, our part as women, when we're not respecting ourselves, when we're not in that connection with our power and self-respect, and learning and knowing how to hold ourselves in alignment, because and men too, there's this disconnection for both men and women, young boys and girls, that at a young age is abandoning who we are, our power center, and where we receive love, validation, and attention. And so then the distortion happens. I'm going to use sex to get it. I'm going to post promiscuous pictures to get attention, or I'm going to flirt. Men, well, I want love, I'm just going to take it. I have this sexual drive. I don't need permission. I'm just going to take it. And so I think at a young age, boys and girls are not being guided to how to be in integrity with their own body, and understand their own sexual urges, so that it can be directed in a healthy way within themselves or within another person. I don't think we have great support for the sexual awakening of young boys and young girls. And when there has been abuse, neglect, and feeling unworthy in whatever parenting dynamics occurred as a child, there's this gap where we're seeking that from outside of ourselves. And so sexual addiction comes from that place. And especially if there has been a trauma, there can be some distortion in that. And what is something that you learned as a young boy that you think was just so wrong? So not it. What was something that you were modeled or told that is contributing to this day to your challenges with, sexual integrity?
Oh, for sure, the just sexual exploitation of women.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's just rampant.
It's just rampant. I mean, when you think of a woman, especially a beautiful woman, it's very much about the sexuality. Like, I even hear this constantly. It's so interesting to me. Not in a good interesting so much, but like when there's a really beautiful woman, and if she has any kind of spiritual inclination, she is such a goddess. Oh my gosh, she's such a goddess because she's so beautiful. And it's looks. It's based on looks. And just because there's an inclination towards spirituality, or the degree of, it's not based on how much the person has actually dove into the spirituality part of it. It's that person is very attractive looking, and they have some kind of spiritual inclination. That's what makes them a goddess.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually embodied with that.
Exactly. How would you know? Unless you really got to know the person.
Right. Which might be an interesting thought, to actually get to know somebody. There's another issue that it takes more than 3 minutes in a bar to get to know somebody at a deep level, and it's not just a swipe experience. We've kind of just treated, of course, the objectification of women starts at a very, very young age. Women are taught, you have to get a guy, you have to dress like this, you need to have these eyelashes and look like this in a bathing suit. And at a young age, we've been taught to self-abandon and seek validation and attention and, love and attraction from others, whether that's a man or a woman, others.
And men have been taught to exploit women sexually.
Right. Well, and it's in the media all over the place.
Right.
We're participating in that as women lay all over cars in a bikini to sell a Porsche, or beer or whatever, or Instagram. And so this is where, as women, we get to acknowledge our part in it. That doesn't mean it's okay, unsolicited advances is not okay. Unwarranted or like where it's not agreed upon, where there has been sexual traumas, where there has not been consent, and none of this has been consented. And I'm not talking about that. That is not okay, and this is one of the reasons why, from that sexual distortion, and I work with a lot of women around this issue, from that sexual distortion then, and that vibration of unworthiness, and everybody treats me this way, and I guess this is the way I'm supposed to be treated, then seek out those kinds of relationships that reinforce, like somebody who's married, like somebody who is on a band that's just going to be a one-night stand, like, I guess that's all I'm worthy of, so I'll take it because it's better than nothing. And so with our women wounds, where there's unworthiness, disrespect, past sexual trauma, that is playing out in the adult arenas in how we allow ourselves to be treated if it hasn't been healed and integrated. The other piece is where we've been told to self-abandon and taught and reinforced to self-abandon just to get attention, validation, be popular, get likes, all of this kind of thing. And so that's, at least from a woman's perspective, the trauma and also self-abandonment, where we're participating in allowing men to treat us like this. And there is a journey for a woman to reclaim her innocence and her integrity and her personal power and her really core level of self-respect, so that we can be healthier in our sexual and intimate relationships, that we can choose more wisely, carry ourselves more with greater integrity.
Yeah.
And that's what we can do is and we can speak out, and we can say no, and do our core healing work, and have a whole Sacred Sexuality series around that just for women. But what do you think men can do differently? Where's the healing opportunities for men to shift their, and be more responsible with their own sexuality? And not that they were raised with greater awareness. I mean, media is like highly sexualized media is stimulating men multiple times a day, and I'm sure that's difficult. But what can men do better in this area?
Well, being a person who has chosen a path of yoga, a path of ultimately with that seeking a unity of healing, of connection. It's really, from the yogic perspective, it's so vital that we address many different layers of being, that it's not just mental. Like, we're not going to correct this just from the mental level. So there's asanas, there's physical kriyas to work on the physical body.
Asanas are physical postures, yoga postures.
The postures, yes. Or there's the breath work, the pranayama, to work with the energy body, to work with the energy to uplift and to not be stuck or stagnant in deep unconscious patterns. There is very much importance of reading and learning spiritual scriptures, understanding a more correct, integrated way of thinking and acting and being that is more and more harmonious with your relationships with people and with your environment, with Mother Nature. And then ultimately, these practices are trying to get us to access our deep state of being, where our ultimate joy comes from, where we actually receive that bliss within ourselves, within our love within ourselves. And just from my own personal experience, and I have been practicing for over 14 years, I can say that I've been a very dedicated practitioner, and I'm still dealing with the same challenges that these guys are dealing with who have fallen, So to recognize that, has it helped me? Has it improved me? Has it given me a deeper sense of self? Yes. But also being in this limelight that I am, to the certain degree that I am, of course, there's amplification of what I need to work on myself. Yeah. And so that I have to harness into my practice. That's what I have to ask someone like you to continue to reflect to me, like, what am I missing here? Like, where do I need to grow? Because because honestly, what probably most of those people think, they're doing the right thing, or they're doing fine, or maybe it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
It's not a big deal until the tidal wave happens. Right. Or it's not a big deal as long as you can just keep sweeping it under the rug or putting it in the closet. And so there is this deep and genuine inquiry that the individual has to have. The individual has to have that inquiry of, how can I grow? How can I awaken? Yeah. Because if you don't have that inquiry, there is no real way to do it. So from the willingness. So from the yogic perspective, the individual has to have that.
Right.
Has to have that sincere longing and dedication and showing up. And in the yoga practice, it's not about every once in a while having a therapy session. It's not about every once in a while doing a little bit of going for a run. It's every day you dedicate yourself, you give a certain portion of your day to enlivening, to self-reflection, and to spiritual growth, to connecting with what's authentically you.
And this is the whole, I appreciate that there's many facets of dealing with this, that it is definitely really deeply a personal development and an inward journey, and that we have brothers and sisters to help hold reflection, where we can be like, hey, I'm struggling with this, or that are willing to call us out. And we've got to be willing to be seen.
And we have to be willing to be
seen. And willing to ask, hey. and give permission. Hey, brother, if you see where I'm out of integrity with my health, with my sexuality, with my arrogance, with my ego, with my conditional love, with my voice, if I'm gossiping, if I'm really out of integrity, I give you permission as my brother to be able to voice that. I might have trouble initially swallowing that, being able, you might need to give me a second to get with that reflection, but I choose to know. And I think that the part of personal development and changing this pattern is being willing to do your shadow work. And that is, I appreciate the spiritual practices of daily reflection of what's going on, and am I in integrity with all of the different areas of my life, emotionally, physically, financially, ethically, career-wise, in my relationships. Am I in integrity? Is there anything that is not matching up? And we're quite sneaky.
I was gonna say, there's always.
Ananda, check, fine, everything's fine. We're quite sneaky, and this is where having spiritual teachers, having tribe, having our mastermind groups or our retreats or workshops or things like that are allowing us and giving us the opportunity for self-inquiry over and over and over again. Because we slip. We might be right on, and then a situation happens where, I'm kind of letting this slide, whether it's around food or health or flirtations, even though I'm in a committed relationship, I'm kind of attracted to this person, and just really, being accountable, which it's tough, and yet it's so necessary. And I appreciate your vulnerability about saying, hey, I am still working with this. I am still working with self-care and prioritizing my physical body as I take care of and I do my dharma work, my passion work, and shamangelic healing, and as a mother, as a friend, and as somebody who is devoted to personal development and supporting people through that process. I'm still constantly looking at where I'm not being as accountable as I could be to including myself in that process, including myself in self-care and prioritizing downtime and taking care of the communications that are coming from my physical body, and so that's my growth area, that's my weak link. And the shadow is quite sneaky, is that, everything's fine, I got to go do this. And we're wonderful at distracting, we're wonderful at abandoning self and making excuses. We're really good at these kinds of things, and this is where it becomes a practice, a practice.
Well, because ultimately ideally you don't want to have to build it up to the point where what we'd call in the yoga perspective the Kali point. The Kali point, where everything just gets slashed away, and what certain politicians or whatever that we've experienced, they hit that point where they hit the Kali point. Yeah. And the Kali point is complete wrath.
Fall from grace.
It's complete slicing away, blood everywhere. It's very depicted in that way, so that it's and then it's a big cleanup job.
Well, that's like the cancer diagnosis. That's where,
exactly.
all of a sudden it's bankruptcy because haven't been avoiding financial issues. Yeah. We're all dealing with this right now as things that are not in alignment are rising to be seen, whether it's sexual indiscretions, whether it's the way we spend our money, whether it's the way we treat other people of different skin color, different races, how we are with racial equality or how we're not, how we spend our dollars and how we place our votes. How we treat Mother Nature. It seems right now that this 2020 vision of this year is let's bring it to the surface. Let's look at the ugliest of ugly. And it's not just this person and that person and that person. I appreciate that at the very beginning that you have said, hey, whoever it's happening to externally, where am I participating? What is this reflecting inside of me? I may not be the person with my knee on somebody's neck, but I might be the one standing by and not saying anything. I might be the one that doesn't ask, how is this candidate on civil rights issues? I might not do the due diligence there, and therefore being complicit by putting somebody into office that doesn't hold us accountable in this way, hold us accountable in the environment. Am I looking at what am I doing differently in the environment, and looking at how can I be a part of the solution? Which means I've got to radically, honestly look at where I'm a part of the problem.
Right.
And it's this beautiful, humble journey. This is why I put the lotus here, on our little altar today, because it's this petal of awakening, and then there's this one, and then there's this one, and then we get this sorted, and then here comes another issue, and it's a journey, brother. And I appreciate that we've both been able to just be honest about where we've looked the other way, whether it's about our own behavior or about a teacher or a boss or a politician, or we've looked the other way, and how there is the opportunity for us to rise individually to be more in integrity, and the word that you used, responsible, to be more responsible.
Yeah.
Which doesn't have to be just in a position of power, because how I treat another person's heart, one other person, like that's responsibility. How I treat my own heart and my own body, that's responsibility. I've been falling short there in how I treat myself. I've been irresponsible at times with I've been great at times and then irresponsible at times. And probably the same with sexuality. It's like I've been great and very strong, and other times, nope, it's a shitstorm. And like even in that, we get to be compassionate and also accountable.
Yeah, and that's how we grow.
That's how we grow.
That's a huge emphasis also in the yoga tradition, is in every spiritual tradition. It's like it's incorporated that humans are going to make mistakes. Right. It's like that's how we grow.
But if we make a mistake and are not accountable, and we blame somebody else, and then we deny it, and then we put it under the carpet,
then the bigger mistake will happen.
Then the bigger mistakes happen, the bigger, right? And then here comes the wake-up call.
Yeah, then a tsunami can happen, and a Kali effect can happen.
Yeah, that's the 2x4, that's the rock bottom, that's the overdose. We've all had wake-up calls, I believe. Some small ones, some big ones.
Yes.
And it's the little denial, then sometimes there's all of a sudden a big one.
Yeah.
And so I want to just be in this space of compassion for where it gets missed over and over and over again, and that inviting the awareness that in our family unit, in our sports organizations, in our hiring practices, in our civil organizations, and in our government agencies, in our corporations, and
our spiritual communities.
In our spiritual communities, that we can be having these discussions more, and that the other part of the wounding here is that the reason why a lot of it goes unchecked is because the shame and the guilt of bringing something like this to light, especially when it's a sexual indiscretion, is like, women don't want to speak up because they don't want to be they can be then assaulted
or
outcast, without a job, blackballed from these communities, and this has happened so many times, that you're just the troublemaker and all of that. And so nobody, women don't really feel like there's a lot of motivation to be a whistleblower in this way, because it revisits the trauma, and there's also guilt and shame perhaps in the experience, however it occurred, whether there was consent or not, whether it was non-consensual or consent, there can still be some guilt and shame about whatever happened, or I don't want to bring embarrassment to my family, or whatever it is. or to my children. And so there's a lot of reasons why women don't come forward. And so I want to have compassion for also the men that have been sexually abused, because there's even a bigger stigma often with young boys or men that have been sexually assaulted that overcompensate with their sexual can be overcompensating in that way because they don't want to. They're feeling the guilt and shame about that, and it is unresolved, and it's still working itself out. So, for those that have experienced trauma on any side of this, and for those that have been in this elusive bubble of power and are in their own space of denial and guilt, consciously or unconsciously, being out of integrity in whatever way, just compassion for their journey as well. And for those that are a reckoning is coming, and so that whatever, it's not intending that on somebody, but just acknowledging, to have compassion for them as well. That we've been complicit as a society in enabling this to go that far, and compassion for those of us that have been in a situation and not said anything to our teachers or our in sports organizations or companies where
friends,
family members, that's big, or a sports team, just having compassion for that struggle as well. And I believe, though, that we can rise. I believe that as we talk about this is why we're having this conversation, is that it's not that we have all the answers, but just that we're starting to talk about it, about all sides of it, and that women have a responsibility, men have a responsibility, parents, leaders have a responsibility to improve here, to do better.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I so appreciate you.
Thank you.
I so much appreciate everything that, the beautiful work that you do. I love, you're on tour a lot, depending on what's happening with travel and all of that. But the music that you do also with Jaya Lakshmi, she's a beautiful sister with an angelic voice, and your music together, you bring such joy and passion and play and devotion with yoga and ceremonies and dance and kirtan. It's beautiful, it's ecstatic, it's joyful. I love when you guys bring your light to Sedona. As always, grateful for you in my life as a dear brother and as a friend and someone who's walking the walk and doing your best with it, and as me too.
Yeah.
Just sometimes talking and not walking. Sometimes just talking.
Yeah. Sometimes walking.
Sometimes
and
walking.
Not talking.
Sometimes falling.
Definitely falling, tripping, getting back up.
Yeah.
Got to get back up. And try to do better.
That's
That's all we can do.
I think that we can, just in conclusion, I think we can do better, and I think we can, our own accountability and our own vulnerability. I think that's, and talking about it, and having the courage to call somebody out in the most conscious way. Hey, are you doing okay, bro? Sister, are you all right? Is everything okay? What's going on? What's going on with a non-judgmental space? Anything else you want to add to the people watching or listening today?
Just keep those spirits high. Keep having faith in humanity. Keep having faith in yourself, and know even the smallest of growth can have the massive impact on the collective consciousness.
Yes.
Just even the smallest of changes the whole reflection, the whole field of consciousness. So you doing your work, you having a little more compassion for others, more for yourself, you being able to just make that decision that you a little bit more in alignment with your higher self, with your heart, with your truth, that, just those steps, and then continuing the best that you can, making those steps, those changes are more, in the yogic perspective, those are more impactful than trying to get others to do the right thing. The more impactful thing to do is for you individually, as individually, to do it on our own.
Yeah.
And then to see that reflect outward.
Yeah. Because that's the vibration. When we do our inner work, when we do our core work, when there's internal alignment, we're not inclined to be in disrespectful, experiences. We're not likely to seek outside of us validation, sexual attention, power, money, all of those things, because there's more of an internal alignment. And we don't participate that, and we hold others, more accountable to say, hey, we can rise. We can rise. Let's do our inner work.
Yeah.
That's it. And in one of the spiritual practices that I follow, it's talking about how when women are doing, healing their womb and the kind of desecrations of the feminine, then we hold ourselves differently, and we hold ourselves in relationship differently, and we teach our sons differently, and we lead in the community differently, which helps inform men how to treat women differently. And they're raised with that level of self-respect around women, not only their mother or sisters or other women, but also Mother Nature, and that this is really how we're going to heal the planet. And how we treat the planet is how we treat self, how we treat other, and how we treat her. So this has been so beautiful, and I want to remind everybody to go get free gifts. Let's hear. We've got a couple meditations for you today, and also there's the Sacred Sexuality, the womb, Awakening the Sacred Feminine, which is for women this beautiful series about that process of all the way from birth, conception, all the way to now, of like clearing out the weeds, the distortions, the oppression, the lies, that sexualization in ways in which have not honored ourselves, so that we can learn how to do our inner work and hold ourselves with this internal alignment, and yes, absolutely be a goddess from the inside out, not from the outside in, and then we can better hold space for the men in our lives, sons, brothers, partners, teachers. And so, where can people find you?
Yeah, so the website, I share it with my musical partner Jaya Lakshmi and teaching partner, and jayalakshmiandananda.com. And there's also you can always find me on Instagram, Ananda Yogiji on Instagram, and on Facebook, Ananda Yogiji. You can find me there, and those links will be in the description.
We'll have them in the show notes, definitely.
Yeah.
Highly recommend. Go get this music, and you have a free musical gift.
Yeah, and I get a free gift if you guys want to sign up for a little free download for music. You can do that. There will be a link for that as well. And then, of course, on my music is on Spotify and all the different outlets that you can stream or download. So you can look that up as Ananda Yogiji. I have some solo music, as well as most of it is with Jaya Lakshmi and Ananda. And then you can find the music there.